Noisy accessory drive belts are a common customer concern, but rarely does replacing the belt alone solve the problem for the long term. Learn how to diagnose and correct the cause of the belt noise in today's edition of The Trainer. When you're faced with a customer concern regarding belt noise, think of the noise the same as you do the check engine light. The noise is only trying to tell you that something is wrong with the accessory drive system. While the belt may be making the noise, it's not always the cause of the noise. Isolating and correcting the real cause is still up to you. Accessory drives have grown in complexity over the years, putting greater demands on the belts that drive them. And while the use of EPDM in belt manufacture does extend the life of modern drive belts, it has also made visible signs of wear harder to detect and made them less tolerant than they used to be to system imperfections. Begin your troubleshooting by first identifying what type of noise you're trying to eliminate. There are two basic types: the chirp and the squeal. Chirp is the more common of the two and is most often caused by belt misalignment. It's characterized as a high-pitched, repetitive noise of short duration, usually worse at low engine speeds or idle. Squeal, on the other hand, is a higher-pitched and longer-lasting tone than a chirp, and it generally gets worse as the belt speed increases. It's caused by slippage between the belt and the pulleys, which in turn can be caused by a worn belt, a worn tensioner, or a combination of the two. Now, the only special tool you'll need to distinguish between the two noises is a spray bottle filled with tap water. Before we perform the test, though, let's keep in mind that we're going to be working around a running engine and review a few common sense safety rules. Stay clear of the moving components and be aware that if the car is equipped with an electric cooling fan, it can start running at any time. Duplicate the engine running conditions when the noise occurs. Then, spray a little water on the rib side of the belt and note what happens. If the noise gets worse, it's a squeal, and we'll need to check for belt wear and tension. If the noise goes away, then we're dealing with a chirp, and we'll focus our troubleshooting on causes for misalignment. If the noise remains unchanged, it could still be a chirp, but first, I think I would suspect an issue with a failed bearing in one of the accessory pulley drives, or even a potential failed harmonic balancer. The next step is to perform a visual inspection of the accessory drive system. Notice how the belt travels overall. Is there any sign of belt flop or excessive play? Look closely at how the belt travels over the individual pulleys. Is there any indication of misalignment? Once you've completed that step, go ahead and shut down the engine and remove the belt. Now, regardless of what the ultimate cause of the noise may be, go ahead and replace the belt as part of your repair. Belts can be damaged by misalignment, and reinstalling a damaged belt is only going to cause that noise to quickly return, and so will your customer. And even though we're going to replace the belt, it's still a part of our diagnostic process to carefully inspect the old belt for signs and clues as to what the ultimate cause may be. Think of inspecting a tire. First, we perform a visual inspection to see if there are any punctures or visual damage to the tire. And then we look at the amount of tread remaining. Have you ever wondered why? It's not about how thick the tread blocks are, it's more about how deep the grooves in between those tread blocks are. You see, it's the grooves that help channel away the water, and that prevents the risk of hydroplaning. When those grooves get to a minimum level, it can no longer prevent that risk, and the tire must be replaced. The tread, or ribs and valleys, on a serpentine belt are designed to wedge into the grooves on the pulley in order to generate the friction needed to drive the accessories without slipping. And on a properly fitting belt, there's actually a small gap between the bottom of the belt and the bottom of the pulley's grooves. This gives some place for water to go and prevents the belt from hydroplaning. As the ribs wear, they're allowed to settle more deeply into those pulley grooves, eliminating that gap and providing a reduced amount of friction. That results in slippage, and that results in squeal. First, check the belt for obvious damage or contamination. If there is fluid contamination, identify the source and recommend the appropriate repair to your customer. Look for indications of misalignment and for debris in between the ribs on the belt. Debris can point to misalignment issues, rough or worn out pulleys, and can even be the result of a rough running engine. Now, as I mentioned earlier, serpentine belts are now made of a material called EPDM and have been for many years now. And they're not as prone to showing visible signs of wear and damage as the old belts used to be. In fact, you can have a belt that visually looks okay, but be completely worn out. The only way to tell for sure is to use a belt inspection tool like the awareness gauge from Dayco. The first check to make is to look for excessive cracking in the belt. To test this, just take your Dayco awareness gauge and place it over the belt to make yourself a little window. If there are more than 4 cracks within that 1-inch square, the belt is worn out and needs to be replaced. If it passes this test, we'll move on to the next 2. The next step is to check the rib profile, and for that we're going to use the tooth edge of the belt tool. Simply place the tool into the grooves, keeping it perpendicular and square to the belt. If the belt's okay, there should be an air gap between the tool and the top of the ribs of the belt. If the tool sits flush on the belt is worn and, again, needs to be replaced. Finally, the last step is to check the depth of the grooves. Here we're going to take the side of the tool and we're going to place it into one of the grooves for inspection. It should be visible above the top of the ribs, and you should be able to feel it when you move your finger across the tool. If it's below the surface of the ribs, again, the belt is worn out and needs to be replaced. This one has failed and we need to replace it. Now that we've inspected the belt, let's move on to the rest of the accessory drive system. Visually inspect all the accessory drive pulleys, including the harmonic balancer. Look at the condition of the ribbed pulleys and replace any that show signs of damage. Inspect for debris lodged in the grooves and clean the pulleys with an aerosol brake cleaner and toothbrush. Be sure to allow time for the cleaner to dry, and never use any kind of solvent or any other additive on the belt itself. Rotate the pulleys by hand. They should rotate freely with no binding noticeable, and no abnormal noises should be heard. Idler pulleys should also rotate freely, but not freewheel. This may be an indication that the bearing has lost its lubrication. Check the pulleys for excessive movement by attempting to rock the pulleys with your hand. Idler pulleys may have some movement, but it should be minimal. Worn automatic tensioners are a common cause for squeal. Automatic tensioners wear just as the belt does, and they should be replaced as a set to avoid unnecessary comebacks. Dayco offers accessory drive kits for many models that includes a new belt and everything else you need to do the repair right. The last step is to verify pulley alignment. Pulleys can be out of alignment in 2 ways, axial or angular. Axial misalignment means the pulley is not positioned on the shaft properly, which is caused by the pulley being pressed on too far or not far enough. Angular misalignment is caused by a severely worn bearing within the pulley or an accessory drive component that is not properly mounted to the engine. Now, to help me verify the alignment of the pulleys on this vehicle, I'm going to be using the Dayco Belt Diagnostic Kit. Now, the kit contains a number of awareness gauges, a laser and laser target, and a belt tension gauge. In addition, there's a tension chart, spare batteries, and the wrench you'll need to replace the battery in the laser. Interested in learning how you can win one of these for yourself? Be sure to stick around to the end of the video and I'll tell you how. The alignment tool is made up of two parts, the laser and the target. Now these are precision tools, so treat them accordingly. And of course, I don't have to tell you, don't look the laser in the eye. First step is to disconnect the battery for safety purposes. Next, attach the laser to the crank pulley, making sure it is close to center and seated in the pulley's grooves. Then begin checking the alignment by placing the target on the pulley closest to the laser. Again, make sure the target is fully seated in the pulley's grooves and is located in the same relative position, with the Dayco name facing in the same direction as it does on the laser. If the pulleys are in alignment, the laser should intersect the target on the target groove. If the laser runs outside of the groove, but it's parallel to it, the pulley has an axial misalignment. This is common on power steering pulleys that are pressed on. Correct as needed to bring the pulley into alignment. On the other hand, if the laser hits the target and the line is not parallel to the groove, you have an angular misalignment. Check the component mounting for proper installation, or replace the damaged pulling or bearing assembly. Continue moving the target to the other pulleys until you've verified them all. Now, just a few more things before we call it a day. If the vehicle you're working on has an automatic tensioner and you're replacing the belt for wear or age, be sure to replace the tensioner at the same time. It too is a wear item. If the vehicle uses a manual tensioner, then adjust the tension of the belt to the OEM specification and check it using a tool like this belt tension gauge from Dayco. It's part of their diagnostic kit. Now, if you don't have a spec, here's a rule of thumb for you. Set the initial spec on a chirp belt to 35 pounds per rib. Allow the engine to run for about 5 minutes to break in the belt, and then reset the tension to 30 pounds per rib. Now, you remember earlier I said you could have a shot at winning one of these diagnostic kits? Well, as promised, here's how. Watch the video on the motorage.com, the trainer page. On that page, you'll see a registration form. Complete the form, and everyone who does will receive a Dayco awareness gauge. 3 lucky winners, drawn at random by our friends at Dayco, will win the diagnostic kit. That's a $100 value, so what do you got to lose? Go over to the motorage.com page. The link is in the video description below if you're watching it on YouTube, and enter now for your chance at winning. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today as the trainer. I'm Pete Meyer. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next month.